Please pronounce your names correctly for me.
My name is Rohan Ayinde.
My name is Kevin Demery.
All right, so today we got two people. We got a visual artist who works with painting and sculpture, and a poet's writer.
Yeah, poet, writer, sometimes performance, and yeah.
All right, lovely. I let everybody define themselves. I'm not here to define you.
Absolutely.
So let's, Kevin, you were our original guest, and we have our then additional guest with us. So tell me, both of you, go ahead and just tell me, like, one thing I'm always interested in is sort of basically how do creative people come to be, so that basically their childhoods, their backgrounds, their family, how are they raised, nature, the idea of like nature versus nurture, like was it literally like in your DNA to be it because your parents were creative, or were your parents not creative at all?
That's interesting. You me first?
Yeah, you go.
So funny thing, I was talking about this with my mom the other day, so I went to CCA, California College of the Arts, for undergrad. My grandfather was a janitor there. And so one of the funny things is while he was working there, students would give him like old works they didn't want, like ceramics, paintings, things like this. So he started filling up the house, my grandmother's house. And then the irony in that is that my uncle became an artist. Huh. So he's a visual artist, my mom's youngest brother. And, my grandfather tried his hand at sculpting. He actually was pretty good. Mm-hmm. Little woodworker, right? And then it kind of just got imbued to me. It seemed like I grew up around art, but it all started with that one job,
It sounds like it was literally in your home, surrounding your life.
Yeah. So when I went to art school, it seemed like, oh, this is like being in the living room.
All right.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't tell you.
That's a really great story.
That's the fun of these podcasts.
Yeah. There you go. That's your one piece of knowledge right there. My mum went to theatre school, so she was trained as an actor. But when the last performance of theatre school, she got off the stage and said to her parents, "I'm never going to act again." So it's actually really interesting in as much as I didn't grow up around the theatre in the sense that she continued to act. But
now, wait, where is this? Because I hear a British accent.
Yes, you do. This is London. So I grew up in London, and she went to theatre school in London, Mount View School of Acting. But my grandfather, her father, is also a writer was a writer and a pianist, and so I think that definitely informs how I come to be there. So it is there in the sense that like, there's definitely that trajectory. It's not like right there. My mum is not an artist; she's a counsellor. But
so it basically skipped a generation.
It skipped a generation, yeah. Although I mean, she could have been an actress if she decided not to be like.
Did she ever say why she's
the industry as a woman at that time? I think going to acting school, she realised there weren't many roles for women, or the roles that were there for women were very particular, and she said like being in acting school and being in the green room and stuff, like it was also a lot of what she would say is people from a certain privileged background that she just didn't agree with the politics.
That is such a polite way of explaining that. Wow. So polite. I believe you meant like snobby white people, basically.
Definitely, and she is a non-snobby white person,
like the British upper class kind of snotty,
absolutely
upstairs people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As you say it, and my grandfather was a Marxist, and so she came from a very different background.
That is indeed very different. Yes. All right. So now, Kevin, I'm really bad with names, so I'm going to try and say your names over and over so I don't forget. Cool. So Kevin and Rohan, yes?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So Kevin, your background, so you went to CCA, so you were born and raised in Oakland.
I was born, basically. I was born in Modesto. It's a little...
close enough.
Yeah, it's close enough.
I used to work at a gallery there, and one of our best artists actually was from Modesto.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I know pretty well. But So you went from there, and then you went to the Chicago Institute of Art. Is that right? I'm so bad with
Well, we
Art
went to
Institute of Art, which is.
It's funny, you know, because with all the, I think it's only because of how the AI rose up over the last 60 something years. But
I think they're just a property scam. Is really all they are.
Man, no comment. No comment. They're around, you know. But I'll tell you.
But they own the biggest, most prominent buildings in major metropolitan cities all over the United States. We're talking about the AIs, right?
Yeah, because you get because and correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody who's listening to it's like, I believe you get a certain tax break for being a school, and so that's why they're able to come in and scoop up so much property. Whereas if you was just like Walmart, you couldn't do that.
Yeah, you're thinking the same way I'm thinking, which is
Okay.
basically like as a school, as a nonprofit organization, they basically get a low price mortgage or whatever on these properties, and then it just ends up being this big tax write off for them across the board.
Yeah,
I
nice
know
time to
nothing
sell.
about them, so this is complete conjecture and theory.
Well, this is why you're making the podcast,
have
right?
no-
Someone that you interview is gonna know and is gonna spill the beans.
I have no proof of this whatsoever. It is purely my personal opinion.
Right.
But the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I know it is a for-profit though. It's not for
It's for
profit.
profit. It's for profit. But
Actually, I don't know.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. Here's the
They
thing.
are for profit, aren't they?
It is, but see, that's the thing, though, right? So, fun fact, and it is the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. That's, I guess, what distinguishes it. I don't know. But here's the thing. It is a part of the ACAD schools. It's like the Accredited Art and Design Academy or something like this. You know, I know I'm butchering the acronym, but the acronym is ACAD. And I think what sets it apart from what we distinguish as for-profit schools and everything is very for-profit in America, right? North America, is that it has a certain lineage that it ties itself to, which is kind of like, in no way I'm saying is it the same, but like how there's like the Ivy League, and that was just a conference that they all went to and decided we're the Ivy League, even though UC Berkeley or like Stanford is important schools, but they're not the Ivy League. It's the same concept. Like the ACAD schools is where the School of the Art Institute is in, but like the Art Institutes as an organization is not. So like they do these kind of weird little, you know what I mean? But that's just technical fact.
All right, we'll stop talking smack about the competition. We'll get back to the point. So, which school did you go to?
Me and Rohan, we went for graduate school to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
And is that the one with the Bauhaus connection?
They do have a connection to Bauhaus, right?
You're telling. Oh, Whoa, what's the connection? It's funny because I just went to the Bauhaus 100 year exhibition here.
Laszlo Moholy-Nagy.
Yes.
Yep, they do.
Okay, so that's where he taught.
Yeah, they had a big
That's the one with the
exhibition.
Bauhaus connection.
Yeah, we had a big exhibition of his when we were there.
We did.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay,
And then
very
obviously
prestigious
Chicago has the Bauhaus connection because of Mies van der Rohe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, very prestigious school. I mean, that was one of the grad schools I applied to and didn't get in, but that's fine. So I'm not bitter about it anymore. And you all just graduated, so you're very sort of, I would say, sort of fresh and young to the market.
Yeah, to the wolves.
Yeah. You graduated, what, 2 years ago now?
No, because it was 218.
Oh, wait, a year ago. Yeah, I just graduated. Yeah.
219. Yeah. Back to back. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Kevin, you've had what seems like a very sort of dramatic introduction within a year, 2 years of graduating. You have a gallery that's representing you in Berlin, and you are being exhibited here at the Berlin Art Fair, right?
Yeah, well, Sekile and me, they're stationed out at Frankfurt. And
that's not that big a difference coming from Oakland and Chicago, like Frankfurt versus Berlin. It's fine.
Right. Yeah, some people could say that. I think it's been a wild ride seeing what it's like to come out of graduate school and like do the residency hustle, sell some work, do the shows, the fairs. It's been interesting, but in no way do I feel it's meteoric. It's been ups and downs. It's been a rocky but exciting path.
And that's what that's what I want to hear about, is these ups and these downs, the work you had to put in, the failures, the learning, basically the learning. So like what you've had two fast years of learning a lot.
Man, for real. I know. Yeah, I know. I'm sure you've been feeling that way too.
Yeah. I mean, because you do the 2 years of grad school, and then you're trying to apply everything that you've learned in that very contained space into something that like resonates in the world, you know?
Well, see, this is the thing. I don't. Okay. No. The reason being is because I'm from a different generation. So I'm 46 years old. When I graduated from grad school, there was a sort of a course that was sort of theoretically laid out. And I went to grad school with the intention of being a professor. So that was my direction. I was more focused on getting teaching assistants jobs, teaching jobs, so on, and that kind of thing, more so than necessarily going to galleries and down that line. Yeah. Now, given the state of teaching in 2019 that we're in,
that's where we are.
That's right.
We are here. Yeah.
The state of teaching is horrible.
Absolutely.
I am completely disillusioned by the entire academic bullshit. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Most schools that I have been dealing with recently are more interested in student happiness rather than students learning. And it's driving me nuts. And I kind of want nothing to do with it at this point, which is really ironic because I just got an email asking me to teach again. But
that's great, though.
Sure.
Are you going to do it?
No?
It's just workshops. It's not an actual course. It's fine. I'll do workshops. Those are fun.
Okay.
But academia, it's been going the wrong way because it used to be there was these tenure tracks and there was reliability in that sort of industry. So like if I wanted to be a teacher, it would give me a sense of stability and structure in my life and my career track that I then could be creative on, as my little side thing to keep my credentials looking good. But that doesn't happen anymore. No. Tenure's going away. Like that whole idea of going to grad school, getting a degree, and then going into teaching for some sense of stability in your life is completely gone.
Yeah.
Nah.
So that's what I'm saying. You all are completely different because you're coming out of grad school fully aware and fully sort of intending that you have no stability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Which is wild. I mean, it's because I think about the amount of money that people. I mean, I think that leads into a really interesting question. It's like the amount of money you're still paying off your student loans, right? Yeah. And like at SAIC, people can be paying up to 120 grand over 2 years.
Absolutely.
And that's just tuition.
That's tuition. You still gotta live.
Yeah, you still gotta live, and I
that's
think
what I'm still paying off.
Oh man.
And that's a lot to process, like especially if there's not that stability. So maybe for you it's like, well, I know that there's still a job.
No, there isn't a job anymore.
No, not now, but at the time at least you thought, oh, there's a job.
I did. I mean, I was very optimistic. I remember getting out of grad school going, great, now I can go teach and I can like have the stability of a reliable income, summers off, healthcare, like all these things, and then I'd be able to make my art, and none of that is reliable anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you all are coming out in a very scary time.
It is, and I was just remarking to one of my good friends yesterday on the phone. We were talking about the same topic, and they were asking me, well, what made you decide to do this? And I said, it's kind of the wool gets pulled over your eyes because the lack of education makes you seek out that education. Once you go through, and maybe if you really had a good time, you really had a critical time, you can look back and go, wait a minute. Oh, maybe that wasn't the wisest idea, but I only have that cognition now because of what I went through. So it's this kind of catch-22, and I think now what I focus on more is trying to find ways to build economies around myself. So like I go into this whole thing of like, you have to own something at some point before I would say, or maybe like mid-career. You have to own something, whether it be like it's a property, whether it be, something that actually fuels the work you make, because otherwise you're not actually going to be getting any return on investment. And so that's one of the things that I've been talking about a lot with my friends is like, well, what are we going to do to try to offset the fact that we have so much debt? And we're probably going to be in the rat race, maybe for the rest of our lives. How do you change that? You can't alleviate it without having something that brings you money that you own. That's the only way. And that's what I'm trying to do with the work. I want to be able to build a career.
What I've learned from doing this podcast is that in Europe, it's very different the way the arts is funded. In particular, in Europe, a lot of things, well, most art is funded by grants. Right. Whether it's sponsored grants like from businesses or private people or municipalities, or federal or governments or things like this. There's like most art here and artists are sort of funded by grants of some sort, of residencies, etc., which is not common in America. And I didn't know this until I got here. And I'm like, no shit. So originally when I started this podcast, my idea was, okay, I'll get a lot of listeners and then I'll get advertisers. And then I suddenly realized, I was like, why the fuck am I looking for advertisers when I could just go get grants to fund the podcast?
Can you get both?
I can technically get both.
But the problem with advertisers, though, right?
Yeah,
with podcasts,
this is
like
my point.
You gotta sit there and sound really stupid, saying, and you know, then the wise fool, we've got a great new drink contract with.
Yes, I love my Cadillac Pacifica
exactly.
and my lazy boy chair and stamps.com.
Yeah. He's like, oh, did you know I told my friend to go on stamps.com because it's such a good. He's just like, bro, shut up.
Yeah, because I use stamps.com in Prague. It's ridiculous. So yeah, so I mean, it's just things like this, like little things. Like what happened was like I was born and raised and educated in America, and then I've since then traveled a lot. I've gone to Belize, I've gone to the Middle East, I lived in the Middle East, I've gone to Asia, I've gone all over Europe. I had a very luxurious, spoiled childhood.
Right.
I'll fully take ownership of that. Totally spoiled kid. But what I've realized in moving, so like I moved from America to the Middle East where I taught there for about 6 years, and then I'm now moved to Europe, is that I thought I understood the art world. And I realized after getting into Europe, I have no fucking idea how the contemporary art world works.
That's interesting.
Now, I may have known 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's changed so much. And like you all are a great example of this. Like you all are sort of the next generation, and you're things like coming out of school with this unknown versus like I came out of school with a very theoretically a great direction of going to teach, which ended up fluttering away, much like the contemporary art scene is changing very dramatically. So it's things like social media. Like, so do you all use social media?
Yeah.
Definitely.
But it's always a negotiation as well, though, trying to... This is something I think about a lot of, like, how... Because we have friends who are artists as well, who have graduated with us, who use social media not as a place to show their art, you know?
Okay.
And then there are people who very much use it as a place, like, to share art. And so, like, also navigating the way that people look at you based on how you use your social media, I think is a fascinating thing. Like, do you want to be the person who's using it, like, very professionally, or do you shy away from that because that somehow muddies the value of your work in other spaces, you know? So I definitely think about it. I don't know how you feel about that, Kevin.
Well, that's interesting because, you know, I was thinking about it. I went to the David Hammons show out in LA. It was I think it was his first show in like 45 years, right? And or solo show, first solo show, 45 years. And when I was there, I was thinking about, I had this great class with a professor named Jordan Cantor at CCA, and he talked to us a lot about what kind of conversations you're having and how you should be very cognizant of the way you're having a conversation within the art world, and how people, and this is the whole idea behind my philosophy of building economies around yourself.
Yeah.
You have this character who he kind of became, in terms of Hammons, he became this kind of trickster, where now he has this folklore around him. You know, there's this kind of like thing where, you know, he kind of is like a ghost in the art world. He shows up, he drops his work off, you don't even see him. You know, and I really like that, and so I decided to take like 3 months off of being on social media to focus on work. And, you know, during that time, haven't even been able to talk to you about this because we just saw each other for the first time in 9 months today. You know, I had more calls from people who are on my social media than ever before.
Really?
I got literal people pick up the phone and ask me what I'm doing.
They were wondering if you were dead.
Basically, maybe. But people asking, what kind of art are you doing? What's this? I had a gallerist call me.
Really?
Yeah, not Sakile and Daniel, but I had a gallerist call me from Orange County to check in on the work and say, hey, what are you up to? What are you making?
Because they
hadn't seen it, but maybe we're so used to, and I talked about this with one of my friends, maybe we're so used to seeing this all the time, right, that however you position yourself, I feel like is super important, where I didn't strategically do it. It's just more or less that I think you could call it whatever you want to call it.
Cunning plan.
That'd be cool if I was that cunning. I'm not. But it was the idea of like, wow, we're so used to seeing all the time that me and Rohan were just remarking, and it'd be dope to hear more about this from your perspective, Rohan. But we were in Art Berlin talking about where's the next art movement? Have we gotten to so late stage capitalism that there's no way in which that we're going to have this homogenous society that decides to work towards some kind of common goal and end in art, right? And whether or not we can answer that now, I think one thing that's pointed out there is like in this sea of being different, right? What is really different? And I feel like that moment of unconsciously stepping away from this platform where you have access to everyone that's in your sphere you choose to. People going, where is this guy? If he was always here, why is he not here? What am I missing? That was the feeling I got from it. And I said, wow, there is a lot more to be explored in terms of the kind of way you build something around yourself. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I don't know what to say or to add to that. I think, that conversation that we had earlier, the notion of movements in art not being as visible or present in contemporary art, and like how, what's the reason for that? Is there a reason? Is there like some actual reason, or is it something that is just not feasible because of the times that we're living in? Is it because everybody has the ability to share all of the time that the notion of like a cohesive or cohesion between different types of artists just doesn't? There's so many different artists that are able to share their work that like where you might be able to draw parallels in the past because there were fewer artists, you no longer have the ability to do so because there are so many people making art. But then it'd be really interesting then at the end of a project like this where you're interviewing all of these different people, like does something start to emerge from that in terms of a zeitgeist that exists in the art world?
Well, I mean, there's also still the point too that like the previous art movements, which I put in air quotes here, I mean, they were decided by hindsight generally, and they were decided by intellectual people in an academic white tower that sort of gave it a name. Gave it a name like the, I'm thinking like the Impressionist movement in particular, but that movement really was only happening in a very small group of people in a very small geographical area, whereas now literally I can see artwork from all over the world at the same time.
Yeah, it's true.
But like if you went back to the Impressionistic period, I'll bet if you looked at Japan or China or Kenya or Chile, they were not doing Impressionist artwork at the same time. So I mean that was just Impressionist period in Europe.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to distinguish.
Yeah,
because we were saying,
yes, exactly. Yeah,
we basically thought the same idea, right? That like now that we can essentially be in a global society, has that blown that idea out of the water, or is it more so that the way that we're looking at art movements has to shift?
Yeah, because you can't really do movements anymore. I mean, it's going to be. Well, they're probably going to be like little subsets. I mean, it's just going to be like there's a movement in Eastern Asia. There's going to be a movement in South America. I'm sorry, I just lump an entire continent together. But I mean, they're going to be like little movements in regions. I don't feel like it's impossible that there's a global art movement. Artists are not followers. So like if I saw that there is a movement going on, I'm going the other way.
That's what a lot of people are going to want to do.
Especially I think in this moment where like the notion of authenticity is so, because there's like also a dialogue around the notion of like institutional, like the institute as like a formal and grounded thing. So like within that, and then also like the industry as like, especially like the art world then also becomes an institution in its own right, and people are because of that. Also the notion of authenticity is really important, because you don't just want to be a part of that, you want to be your own thing within that, which is to say, oh, this is why I'm important.
Oh no, we want to be the leader.
Yeah,
we want to be the ones defining the movement. We don't want to be a follower of a movement. What fun is that?
But I was thinking about this in relation to that, where so today when me and Rohan were at Sekile and we were at the booth, we were talking to Sekile, and she was talking about the South African artist Zanele Maholi. Zanele Maholi is showing with them right now. Zanele Maholi is a photographer, and Sekile described it. They like to go by the term, like activist.
Or what was it? Visual activist.
Visual activist. And so, but here's the thing though with that, is like there's a set of politics behind their body of work that I think if you're going to have any kind of art movement, I think whether or not it's global or not, I think the only way you can get people on board and say that my individuality standing out above something isn't more important than XYZ, which I'm not saying this is possible necessarily, but if it were to happen, I think it would be like this is a means to an end, and then that's when it could be, somewhat of a movement. But otherwise, why would art be centered around a movement necessarily?
Well, yeah. Unless, as you're saying, it is that movement is less about like the art style and more about like the intent. Right, because then you can be part of a movement in which you're saying like we're trying there's a message, but not all of the art needs to like aesthetically speak the same language. Whereas like say the expressionists or the language was the movement was in the language of the work as opposed to the ideas.
But which was only seen in hindsight.
Yeah,
I mean
not all the time though. I mean, like the surrealists.
Surreal, yeah.
They self-defined as such, or the Bauhaus again. I mean, that was a movement that you could say was a self-defined.
That's so much bigger than just the visual arts, though. I mean, that was a movement of architecture and lifestyle and everything.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it has to be. I was also going to say to that same degree, when you look at like the freestyle series from the Studio Museum in Harlem, they're not doing that anymore. But this whole idea was like, I believe the question was, do you reject blackness as a concept, or do you embrace it within your work as an artist of African descent? That was the whole freestyle series, and it has people like Hammons in it. It had people like it just had so many people in it. That it really spanned, I think, 2 generations of visual artists. And I think that was like a movement made by a curatorial team. It was very interesting,
It is interesting. I mean, what's the most recent movement you know? Like the last one I remember being like officially sort of titled was like postmodern or something like that. But it's like, where do you go from like postmodern? Post
black,
anti-modern, Let's go back to the classics. That's basically what we're in right now, if you ask me, because you see this kind of push towards craft that was almost completely rejected about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this return to.
Now, are you saying craft or craftsmanship? Like,
I think both.
Okay.
I think both. I think it should be fair that you do point out craftsmanship maybe is the first, and craft, right? Where there's this need to say, like, for example, I remember I'm old enough.
Mm-hmm.
Where don't you remember when people thought portraiture was just like, I'm no portraiture.
Yeah. Old enough. Wait, how old are you?
No, we can't give it away now. We can't give it away now.
Oh yeah, you're not that old.
But here's.
I'm 46. Trust me.
I'm 26.
Yeah.
But I'm saying though, that's
you're old enough to be my son.
That's real. But how old are you, bro? How old are you?
I don't believe in age.
Oh, see, he doesn't like to tell. That's an Aquarius thing. But here's the thing, though. I remember when I was young in art school that they were talking about like, portraiture. Like, nobody wants to do portraiture. that existed then, even though, and that's crazy to me to think about now, but it's because it's like now, portraiture, it's up, it's doing well, and I think that here's the thing with that.
Didn't know it was out.
I think that there are always movements. It's just about that we as maybe the artists or the creative practitioners in any field, we're not the ones who are usually interested in defining them. I don't think.
We just want to make what we want to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's why the curator people, the curators and everybody.
Yeah, let those other people define genres and time periods. That's not our role. Our role is just to make really interesting things to make them think more.
Yeah.
I can get down with that.
All right, I want to touch on something, and I know this might cause problems, but it might not. Let's see.
Let's see what's going on.
All right. I was looking at your website, Kevin, and you have very, let's say, strong opinions about your African American descent.
That's interesting.
It was very obvious in your work about like your confidence, your strength. I'm not sure what words to put to it, but bear with me.
Yeah.
This is less about you, and this is actually more about me.
Okay, cool.
I'm a white guy.
Sure.
And let's just go with I'm an idiot. Okay. Like,
but we should say for the record, me and Rohan are both black.
Okay, sure. For the record, that's a good call. Yeah, this is a podcast. Nobody can see that. It's a good call. So
they might not know.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm a white guy, and I saw the Jaffa. Do you know Jaffa?
Yeah, Arthur Jaffa. We sat down and watched that thing.
Love is the message.
Love is the message.
I saw his exhibition he actually recently had in Prague.
Oh, cool.
And it was a full beautiful. It was a beautiful place. I'm having difficulty with understanding. I'm not sure what is to say about it. That's not going to make me sound like some racist bigot. But
go for it.
No, I mean I'm not. That's the thing is I'm not. But basically, I'm asking for your help in helping me understand.
We were talking about this too today.
We were talking about it. Yeah.
Well, in my mind, okay, I'll go from my own experiences. So, I was in the Middle East, okay, and I was teaching at a university where I taught Muslim women.
Oh, cool.
That was my whole job, and I taught Muslim women art.
Wait, you mean you taught not about Muslim women? You were teaching Muslim.
My students were Muslim women.
Got you.
Yes. And I was teaching about art, and I kept telling them, because they would turn in artwork to me as their assignments that was all about being a Muslim woman.
Okay.
And I kept telling them, don't make work about the fact that you're a Muslim woman. Make work about you, and you happen to be a Muslim woman. So make good work. But the fact that you're Muslim and the fact that you're a woman shouldn't be the thing that defines your work.
Okay.
Now, you see, you seem to take a different tact with this, and this is what I'm asking about. Because, when I sit back and think about my own work, because, I've had to sort of look at myself, because basically I'm asking you all questions, so I have to ask these questions of myself also. Mm-hmm. So, when I was telling these students that, and then I looked at my own work, I said, is my work screaming American white Christian?
You never know.
And it might just be kind of. I'm not going to lie. I think my work screams male for sure.
Sure, maybe.
I do figurative works.
Okay,
a lot of women. I do a lot of figurative women. So it screams male.
Okay.
That's pretty much it, male.
Yeah, that's what it'll do.
But beyond that, so I'm very interested in the fact that you're sort of embracing this and you're putting it in the forefront of your work instead of not I think art should be art regardless of your gender, your age, your sex, your whatever. Yeah. Good art is good art. I don't care about all these other things, race, whatever. I don't go back and look at. I don't even know some example, but old art, and I go, oh well, but that was made by a woman. It's not as good. I don't think like that. To me, good art is good art. Period. Bad art is bad art. I don't care if they're made by a Muslim woman or they're made by an African American man. That doesn't concern me. Good art, bad art. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your choice of doing this.
Yeah.
Did that make me sound like a horrible racist?
No.
Okay, good. I was very scared to bring up this topic, actually.
No, it's important. Just to clarify on your question, when you say your choice of doing this, your choice, is the question for you the choice of the framing of the work or the choice of the content of the work? Because I think those are two. Because I think if Kevin didn't frame his work as such, you wouldn't necessarily, not in all of the work, you wouldn't necessarily read it as
right. So you're saying like the text that accompanies it, or the artist.
Yeah,
statement
I'm
that
asking
goes
for you
with
that
it.
when you ask that question, are you asking more about the text that frames Kevin's work, or are you asking about?
When I looked at his website, it was the imagery of the work that stood out first, and sort of, I will say, bolder than the written text, like the artist statement that you had there. The artist statement was, it was very eloquent and all that. It wasn't very sort of in your face sort of like kind of stuff. So, but the artwork, certain ones were very much in your face. Very strong, bold statements about like, this is made by a black man.
You think that's what you felt?
Some of them. Not all of them. Yeah. More the paintings than the sculptures.
Yeah, the sculptures. I think I'm leaning. Well, let me say this, because I think there comes a point where a lot of people have asked me a similar question, where I guess my thoughts around it and what the kind of work I make is that I am making from a space where I can't. I don't mentally step out of that space a lot. So, like, for example,
you're always a black man.
Yeah.
Wait, okay. I'm gonna come off as like the horribly most bad, racist, bigoted person. But
that's all right. Just be blunt though. Let it out for real.
I know, but like, I just like, God, is my face getting red? Because like I feel like it's getting red.
Let's keep doing it.
It's okay. It's okay.
Be the wise fool.
This is our interview now.
Embarrassing, mate. All right. What's the proper term? African American or black?
That's a good question. This is a debate.
This is a debate.
I know, because I was raised in a time, because keep in mind, I'm older than you all. I was raised in a time right when that sort of debate started. Like,
but can I
30 some years ago.
Can I add something before we get back into the deeper meat of it? That is very specific to the States, right? I mean, right. Black is kind of eternal. It's like me and Rohan are black because of the context of the African diaspora. African American is a term that that's reclassified after Negro. So I think that it's like really important that it was a way.
So wait, you believe that it went from Negro to African American as the next term? I would have said black was the next term.
Black was the term that was self. This is my.
Black came out in the 70s, right?
Yeah, but it was a
restart of the Black Power movement. It was like black became in the States, and again, it's important to kind of talk about that contextually. That's relative to a North American phenomenon, but like black comes about with really I feel like it was Stokely Carmichael.
Stokely Carmichael
is like
Black Power,
right?
Black
and then
power.
That's the kind of tide that turns into like black being the nomenclature, the kind of identity category that comes out of African American. And then I mean it's muddy. I mean, and I'm sure there's someone that listens to this and who's a historian in that who might say, no, actually it is.
And I'm sure there's somebody listening to this who will disagree with whatever you're about to say as well.
Absolutely. And so that's why I say it's important for me that why I'm not saying it's a jump from African American to Negro. Or I mean, reverse that, Negro to African American. But like, I've had so many countless conversations with my mother where when she was a young girl, she was like, we were called Negroes. We were classified as Negroes. We wrote on our paper, Negro. Can't necessarily say that for everybody around the world, but specifically for the black people in North America, she was considered Negro. I grew up in a time where I wasn't checking black. It wasn't even black / African American as they do on a lot of these little.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember like my childhood, what I remember seeing as the choices.
Exactly. African American was like there when I was young, and for me, it was more of like a result of many different congealing political philosophies that basically were saying we're tying these people's ethnic lineage that is kind of largely ambiguous because of the lack of historical documentation to the fact that these are American people. They're African American. But anyways, to that point, right? yes, I prefer black. That's my thing. I prefer black.
Okay.
But in terms of the work, right? And like it's
Let's get back to the meat
right,
of the
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, because you know the historians, they can eat us up later. But the
I love it. All of us just like moved in our seats to get a little bit more comfortable because this is going to be uncomfortable.
yeah, you know, and that's cool to me because I think, like, I remember I was dating somebody who wasn't from the States. She wasn't even black. She was Southeast Asian, and she was asking me a lot of questions similar to this, where she was asking like, you know, it seems like you're so wrapped up in being black, right? And I said like, I think that it's a fascinating and delectable conversation to those who aren't a part of it. I live in it every day.
Well, and that's my point. Is like I'm an idiot about it. Like I'm completely insensitive. I know nothing about it, and I'm gonna, you know, so I'm not gonna see. Oh, I understand your pain. No bullshit. I have no idea what you've gone through. I don't understand it at all. So help me out.
But it's not even. But it's not even about pain necessarily. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, that was just like a reference to the vernacular. Like I feel your pain.
But tell me though, what you know would be cool, because then I feel like me and Ro could really speak to this kind of relationship of being didactic or not in the work. What work of mine stood out to you that you were like, oh, this one really makes me think, ask this question? I mean, I have several works. I'm sure one stands out in your mind.
It would be the one that you were holding up the black bars with white letters on it, where it was reading something about like I'm.
Oh, that's a line from Nas.
Oh yeah.
You remember that one?
Yeah.
I don't even remember exactly what it said.
Well, that was a great line because, you know,
What is the line again?
the line, you know,
Were you
excuse
just
me.
holding it up?
I was just holding it,
that's
but
what
I
I
made
thought.
it. But I'll say it, you know, and I want to apologize to anyone who may be feeling uncomfortable with the N word being used. You know, black or not, real talk. But the line says, "I need a new nigga for this black cloud to follow, because while it's over me, it's too dark to see tomorrow."
Yeah.
But that line, what's interesting about it, and you talk about it being, you know, very didactic or whatever, is that that's something for people who are really in the know culturally. That's a line from Nas, the rapper, and
Which I didn't know because I'm that kind of not hip person.
And it's from the song "The World Is Yours," right? And what's great about that line is actually the 44th and 45th line, depending on when you're reading it. So I was thinking about this concept of, you know, the idea of it seems like it felt like every new election year, somebody was asking me, what is it like for black people right now? And I always say, it's the same. Like, it's not getting any different.
I would think it's getting worse.
People are screaming, oh my God, it's so crazy, 2019. I'm like, yo, it's been the same. It's over here. I'm like,
I'll take this as a racial thing. Like, I'm a white person and it's getting worse. Like, I'm embarrassed by President Trump. Like, I'm embarrassed that I'm somehow like, when people meet me on the street and they're like, where are you from? I say America. Oh, President Trump. I'm like, yeah, please do not equate me to that fucking idiot. Right. Like, he is such a outlier of how stupid Americans can be. Not even white Americans. Like greedy capitalist Americans. He's just horrible. I hate him. And I hate what he's done to the world's perception of America. But anyways, we're not going to get into politics. It's enough we're talking about race already.
You could go there, yeah.
We're already talking about race. I think that's more than I'm comfortable with already. So
that's funny. But yeah, I mean, it's just, if you think about it like that, to the outside looking in, like that piece, like, I think there's always this question of like, with black art in particular, are you making this work to try to translate? Are you a translator?
But see, you just did it. You said black art in particular.
Yeah.
Why is it black art?
Well, because me and Rohan, like Rohan is from London, you know what I mean? I'm from America, and I've had plenty of friends from other parts of the world. But what makes it black is that there's I think there's an experience that ties black people together. And it's hard to put it into words. I wouldn't try to dare do it right now. But there's something about that, you know, being black and how globally what that has meant for, you know, hundreds of years, really. It really links the people together, even when we're in dire disagreement. And so I feel like when I say black art, I don't feel very different from like Zanele Maholi, who's in the same booth as me right now, right? Like, I look at their work, they're South African. I've never even been to South Africa, but when I see that work, which is, you know, these two pieces right now at Art Berlin about, it's self-portraits about being a black woman, I feel that pain. I look at that and I go, I've never been a black woman.
You feel the pain. See, that's my reference.
Yeah, I'm like, I look at that and I go like that. I feel that, I feel like I could feel that from the experience of living black. That I'd be very shocked if somebody else could feel it and they weren't. That's what I'm sure it's possible for sure.
And that's interesting because I mean, maybe I'm an insensitive idiot or whatever, but like when if I were to look at works by some other white artist, I wouldn't go like, oh yeah, I feel the white, like bond there. Like white artists don't have this bond, but like you, who you just said, you looked at an artist who's also black from a completely different culture, completely different background, completely different everything, and you can relate to it in a way that I probably never could.
Well, because when you're saying about whiteness, we got to remember that the and this is just loaded. And I want to really pass this. This is going to be an area where I'm definitely passing the baton to you.
This whole thing is loaded. I know
because this is about to be loaded. But I think you could break it down maybe better than me. But I'm a
writer after all.
Yeah, I'm gonna start this off. I think Rohan's gonna be able to finish it better. But check it out. Here's the thing. I think that the concept of blackness, and this is gonna be very controversial what I'm about to say. So this is why I'm about to pass the baton.
Look, I just made this whole podcast super uncomfortable by even bringing this topic up.
No, but it's so necessary, these conversations, which is going back to what we spoke about earlier, because we were talking about there is also a culture that I completely understand and respect and know where it comes from relative to questions of privilege and power. But there are people, many people I know and many people I respect who wouldn't have this conversation necessarily. It's not my job to educate you.
And
you
my parents are going to be so angry with me for even bringing this conversation up because it's going to embarrass them to no end.
Yeah.
I hear that. Well, I guess to say this, like, I think the creation of blackness and the creation of whiteness, as we understand it, particularly in the North American sphere, was not the same creation, even though it has similar ambiguity. And what I mean by that is like, okay, if say you're French, you're Irish, you're English, and you're Scottish, and you have no knowledge of this history, right? You just are a blend of these things, and you've grown up in maybe like Birmingham, Alabama, and your culture is Birmingham. You know what I mean? Okay, now you take that same individual, you put him next to an individual who is a descendant of slaves, who maybe their culture, part of them came from the Caribbean, part of them came, they were here in North Carolina for, hundreds of years. A large part of their existence has been, and this is and people argue this, but it's subjugation. They've been under a pressure. They've been under a certain level of pressure and a calm in certain respects that have shaped and folded their identity to something very specific for generations. That doesn't necessarily do the same thing to this young person who maybe is from Birmingham, And so what happens is that you can't equate the two because they're both ambiguous. And there's certain different levels of power that exist within these two spheres. And so when I say I look at someone who's South African and I see them in pain, and it's about maybe blackness, right? I look at it and I go, I know what it's like to have been in pain like that. And I don't say that our existence is about pain solely, because I know a lot of people take issue with that. Right. It's not. But I think I can understand and look at that work and go like, I know what it was like to feel like that at 5 years old and still be 26 and feel that way now. And imagine that I'll still understand it at 46. And so there's this kind of thing where it kind of links you, right? And so when I hear, and I know it's not the same for every white person, but I hear someone who says I'm white, and I don't look at a white artist and feel that way. I'm like, yeah, your experience is different. It's not the same just because of the ambiguity,
Yeah. I mean,
I know it's sobering, right? These beers were in vain.
Sorry.
It's such a big topic, right? I mean, it's such
like I ran into this at one point. I was friends. I was a roadie. I used to tour around with rock and roll bands for a long time, up and down the East Coast. And my best friend was this guy, Quentin Coleman from Washington D.C. And I remember one time he said, "Oh, I've got to run back to my grandma's house and pick something up." I said, "Okay." And so we drove up, and we were in my car. And he said, "Oh no, here, park around the corner. I can't let my grandma see I'm with a white guy. And I was just like, what?
Is that true? Really?
Yeah. Like he literally would not allow me to drive up to his grandma's house.
Yeah.
And I was just sort of like, wow, would I do the same thing? Like, would I do that if the roles were reversed at my house? And it just made me think, I'm like, this is very odd. Like, it was the first time that, because I was 20 something at the time, but like this is 20 some odd years ago, but like it was the first time that I really had this feeling of like, I'm being prejudiced against. And I was like, that's a very interesting situation that I had never experienced up to that point, because I had lived a life of white privilege up until, a certain point in my life when I chose to be a roadie and do a bunch of drugs and party and all this kind of stuff. At that point, then I suddenly was opened up to a whole different set of cultures and things like this. So it was very different. But I mean, I grew up where I got in trouble because I took a young friend of mine, Ruben, who was a black man, and took him to the country club with me to play tennis. Because I wanted to play tennis with my friend Ruben. He's a very good tennis player. And the country club literally told me he was not allowed to play there.
Yeah, so it's just straight up. That's what the difference.
And this was in like 1985.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they was in full swing. I mean, this is the idea, right? It's like
You would think 1985 is not in full swing.
oh wait, that's the Reagan
Still
era.
in full swing.
For us, that's the Reagan era.
Okay, like I'm totally oblivious to these things.
But I think it's important. I mean, and I feel like this could footnote that to talk about some art before we end it up.
Yeah, we got to talk about some art.
Is like I think it's important to remember that your experiences are different. From your experience is always going to be different unless you guys check a lot of the same boxes in whatever sphere you live within. So, for example, that grandmother, she may have been just like traumatized.
Absolutely.
But you know what I mean? And it's like, so it's important for us to remember that, like, prejudice is not power necessarily. It's what happens when you can back up that prejudice with power. This is the argument around the concept of racism as we understand it.
Yeah.
It's like what power, like he has the power, like that, the power in that situation of your friend Ruben is you can't come here. What could Ruben tell them? What could Ruben tell you? That's the important thing about it. So I just think that's why I feel like I can look at some art and go, this is black. This is why I consider myself, and I don't say it a lot in the spheres of art, but I'm a Pan-Africanist, So that's important for people to know.
Sorry, that's a phrase I've never heard. What does that mean?
Pan-African.
This is how white I am. I have no idea what you just said.
The sweet and condensed version to get to the art,
This is an art podcast. In the end, I know we're talking a lot of racism, but it is an art podcast, I promise.
No, that's cool because we make that. We talk about this in
art.
art
Is race, race is art.
Yeah.
It all intersects as well, right? Like
it does. I mean, like I said, I saw this Jaffa exhibition, and I'll be honest, I'm just going to be as blunt as I can and make myself to be come off as a big idiot as I want to be, but I didn't understand most of it.
Yeah.
Like, in all honesty.
What was in the exhibition?
There was huge. There was lots of stuff. I mean, it was like 10 rooms of work.
All of Jeff. I didn't even know. That's crazy.
I know you produced like that.
Yeah.
It was
videos?
There were monumental video projections.
Okay,
that were like floor to ceiling.
Makes a lot of video.
That was just one room. There was like a Black Hulk. Like stand-up cutout,
and it was like black-skinned Hulk. It was a dark black Hulk.
Well, it was basically like he illustrated Hulk, but with black instead of green. That's it.
So was it brown skin or he was black?
Black.
This black,
like hardcore black, like black Sharpie.
Right.
Oh, okay, like Black Hulk. Okay.
Yeah. Not like a cocoa kind of a black, but like Sharpie black, hard. But I will say there was one piece though that really I thought was quite spectacular, which was a Confederate flag that was dyed. I'm assuming dyed black, maybe, or maybe it was just made out of black fabric.
Interesting.
And then behind it, hidden, was a smaller Confederate black flag that you had to know to look around behind it to see the second one.
And it was just a smaller
version of the same thing.
It's interesting.
It was a very interesting piece.
Yeah, I didn't know that he made like that.
I didn't either. I mean, because you know what? I think there's so many other people that we get pointed to with sculpture of that kind.
Yeah.
Nari Ward, David Hammons.
Yeah.
So many people. But the thing with that though is that you have a connection potentially to understanding the specific historical context of that flag.
But I know the specific historical context of the Hulk.
Right, but like you got this superhuman. I could wreck anything, but I'm black. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
But also Jaffa's work. I mean, because the thing about Jaffa's work in so many instances is also the way that he is like playing with the sheer number of images that
his
we come into.
videos.
You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
that's so much of the work is about dealing with the multitude of images and then thinking through also the ways in which we come into being through, around, and in relation to those images. Which, so like a Black Hulk is like, I don't know, it's like there's that skit on a Logic album, I think, where the two kids are talking about like Black Seinfeld, Black Superman, and the guy's like, we've got Black Seinfeld, that's modern.
Yeah.
And it is, and it's like, I don't know, like it's also like how do you see yourself projected in a culture? Because I think that's also, and again, this is like when we talk, if we're talking about Black art as well, there have been moments in the history of art in which there have been attempts to define exactly what that means. Do you know what I mean? And so like, I think when we say Black art now, if Kevin and I are talking about Black art, that's not the same thing as like in the 60s when they're talking about, in the 60s when they're talking about Black art, that was a very defined, or there was a very particular attempt to define
Often
what that
political.
meant politically alongside the project of art making.
Right.
And it was like there was one way, or there was a directive almost of like what it meant to make Black art, which I think has changed and shifted as political contexts have changed, and also as people have also understood that there were times at which that was also a particularly chauvinistic view of what blackness was.
Oh,
as
I mean,
well.
we could start on the whole like gender issue in the arts as if you wanted to, but unfortunately, it's three men sitting around a table, so we're probably not the best representatives of this.
Not that it shouldn't, and I mean, I'm glad you brought it up, you know what I mean? Because not that it shouldn't at least be acknowledged, whether or not we're the ones best to speak on it. But,
No, we're not.
but for sure, it definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna speak for two of you.
But I think also, just to say, like, to circle back to the whole point of, like, to somebody who's not coming from the cultural context, it does scream. It's like, oh, this is black stuff, right? And I think that's kind of, in my work, and I think that's, in some of it, I think that's kind of funny to me because I'm like, that's cool, but, I'm not necessarily trying to be a translator. And I think that in a lot of ways it can be very comfortable to not walk into something that's screaming what it is, and it depends on the individual. But my work is in an evolutionary state. It's growing. And I think you can say that all work is. That's fine. But I'm definitely not going to be cranking out the same work that you just saw over the next 10 years even, let alone 20. It's growing. And my understanding of what it means to be a black person is growing. Alongside that. So, I would always challenge somebody where, like, if you saw some of the work I showed with Sekile and me, or even the most recent things you could see, like with the wind chimes on there, that's the most recent work.
Yeah, I saw the sculpture, or at least on your website.
The sculptural work is the most recent in relation to that, and that's an older work, So it's like getting, I think, at some of the same ideas, but as I always say, sharpening the knife.